Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Sammy, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Hi, I'm going to say good afternoon. We're across the pond from you, so different
That's
part
right.
of the day. Thank you for having me.
I'm so delighted that you're here today. And I'm recording this day on right after the U.S. elections. And so I just want to take a moment to say solidarity to everybody out there. There are lots of feelings. It's a difficult day for many people. It's an exciting day for many people. And what we're going to do today is talk about how we can have good work environments, how we can move forward in the process and of having healthy work environments and healthy cultures. So
Mm,
peace to all of you out there, no matter where you fall on the political spectrum. So,
okay.
Sammy, let's start with you. Can you tell us about the first job you ever had as a young person?
Yes, in theory. I think I was one of those kids that started working, before I started working. So I remember helping my mum out when she was a waitress in a tea room, it was like a little cafe. And she'd give me 20 pence from the tip jar for clearing a table, probably when I was very, very young. And I think that probably set me up for some of my very early jobs in hospitality, whether I was waitressing or washing up in pubs or working behind the bar. But hospitality, I think, formed quite a big part of my I wouldn't say career. That would be too big a stretch for a 13-year-old, but my early working life, I suppose. And I draw on it still. I still think to myself occasionally, this is even in consultancy, what's the hospitality moment in this?
Mm.
What have I learned from being a great waitress that can come into this moment of account management or something?
So, what did you learn from being a great waitress?
Oh, I think one of the things that I learned was that you are representing two people
Mm.
most of the time. Um, so when I go back to the kitchen, I am representing the customer who's happy or unhappy, and I need to fight their corner. And when I go back to the table, I need to be appropriately representing the kitchen and the chef and what's going on with them, and not in order to take sides, but just to make sure that there's some balance going on of empathy between the two. And so I didn't realize I was learning that at the time, but I worked for a while in marketing and brand in account management, and realized that that's often the role I was playing between client and designers or developers or whoever else might be involved, that I needed to represent the party that wasn't present
Mm.
in the conversations. And I think that allowed me to have sort of a level of diplomacy often in conversations or in conflict.
That is so elegant. I just absolutely love the way of thinking about that as a server because a lot of times, of course, we think about our job just about how it affects us. How are these people in front of me affecting me? And how are
Mm,
the people in the back affecting me? And what is this going to mean for me? And of course, there's an element of that, obviously, but thinking about it in this real service perspective of you are there to serve a variety of constituents. And I just
mm,
love that this idea of being an advocate for your colleagues, whoever they may
mm.
be, but then also an advocate for the clients, because without the clients or the customers, there is the colleagues don't have the ability to do their work, right? It is
Yeah,
this really integral give and take.
absolutely. And sharing that, coming back to a kitchen when a chef is frustrated, let's say, um, that a plate's been sent back or something, and saying, okay, but imagine, this might be the only night of the year that they ever go out for dinner. So let's make it, awesome. And similarly, when a customer is pushing it to try and not get them to empathize because they're still the customer, but to recognize what it is they're asking for, and to clarify that. So I often say to people, and there was a while where I was mentoring quite a few account managers in different agencies, and I would often say, I think you need to do a stint as a waitress or a waiter,
Mm.
because it really does, put you under pressure, under heat, in environments where you need to be representing multiple people at the same time. And very few of them are you, unfortunately.
Right. And of course, interestingly enough, that when you act that way, you are representing yourself. This is who I'm
Yes.
about, and I am trusted to be for the best process, right? I want
Yeah.
the good for all parties involved. And so I love that idea also with customers, clients, helping to align their expectations because we
Mm.
do no service to them if we allow them to think that what they're requesting is reasonable when it is not,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
to
Or there's
help
not going
them.
to be a knock-on impact of what, a new request or a shift in request. Sorry, I interrupted you,
Oh,
Mary.
no, no, absolutely. So where did you move on after you left hospitality?
So I moved from my hometown kind of across the country to run a guest house, so still in hospitality, but I was 19. And a guest house is, I think, probably a wonderful job for someone who's just retired. It's not a job for a 19-year-old. So while it was a couple of years that really settled me in the city I now call home, Bath, I was probably itching to get out and do more things and meet more people. So I went back to college in the evenings and studied finance. And so my then next role from the guest house was in a marketing agency running finance, or running, it was a small agency running their finance mechanisms, where I soon sort of noticed that actually there was a lot of marketing projects or website builds that were going unmanaged. And so I sort of started picking things up and realizing I then had this interest in marketing and brand. So I followed my nose on that one and moved to a brand agency that I loved and worked in for many years. And there started to discover internal brand, as it's sometimes referred to, or culture.
Mm,
And and realized really that mostly what I'd been following had been getting a closer proximity to people.
mm,
Despite having been in finance, I'd been drawn to the projects and the clients, and moving on into brand, I was drawn to the research we did with clients, customers, or the next knock on. And in culture, I was going deeper to really understand what mattered to people. So it was the ripe old age, somewhere in my mid to late 20s, that I realized, oh, I quite like people.
mm.
That's the thing that's been driving me, and I hadn't noticed.
So interesting because when you said you went from the guest house to finance, it seemed a little bit jarring. You
Yeah.
obviously care about people and you're interested in working with and collaborating with people. So why did you decide to go into finance instead of something it's more overtly people centered?
Yeah, I think in truth, I just hadn't realized that people was a thing that you could go and work in. I think the schools that I went to were heavy on, maths and English and science and very traditional subjects. And I don't think I really had an awareness of jobs, that weren't the stereotypical ones. You can go and become a police person or a fireman or a doctor, or, these sorts of things, all the ones that I had seen and experienced, which was hospitality. Um, I don't know that at that time I would even have realized there was a job where you could go and work with and on people. Um, and I'd always liked maths. So I thought, well, I'll go and do that then. So it was all fairly, it wasn't particularly deep thinking, I think, that drove my first few maneuvers, if you like. I just thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. I'll do that then.
And so now you're working in internal culture?
Yes, yeah. So often the work that my colleagues and I at Farleigh Performance do is put into the box of organizational development. Sometimes it's called leadership development, sometimes it's teaming or systems coaching. There's many, many words that describe what we do. I think most of the time it feels like we are helping people to have quality conversations that matter.
Mm.
And I feel incredibly privileged to be a facilitator in that world. And just often it feels like what we're doing is just lightening the load,
Mm.
which I really enjoy. You see people say things that are 3 or 4 word sentence, but they've been carrying those 3 or 4 words for so long that
Mhm.
they are heavy and they are tired under them. And we create a space where some of that can come out. And and we can move forward together from it. So I do feel very lucky to have meandered and accidentally found myself in this world of sort of system coaching and people.
It's interesting when I think about leadership and leadership development and what goes into that, right? And
Mm.
so much of it is the development of so-called soft skills. So
Mm.
when you, which I think they are, when we say the soft skills, they get kind of demoted, but we know that they are just as important. Not hard skills are very, you need to know to do the mechanics of your job, but you need them both. I think there's parity
Yes.
there, not one more than the other, but you need them both. So when you go in and you are working on leadership development, what is the
Mm.
thing that you notice most is missing?
Oh, that's a good question. She says, delaying the answer. Um, what do I notice is missing? I think there's many different things, right? And different organizations will breed
Mm,
different things that are there or are missing. I think one of the things that is often missing is people knowing that they have permission to be themselves.
mm,
I think there are organizations where there are lots of people who are verbally or in processes or whatever being told, we want to be authentic, we want this to be a safe space, etc. That's all great, but telling someone and demonstrating to someone in order to really shift their mindset is quite different. And I think there are lots of organizations where there are people walking around with a mindset that says, I have to be something different here. Um, and and it's only when you get them into conversation about their lives more broadly that you realize, at work they're a micromanager. But on the weekend, when they're training, a kids' football team or something, they are really embracing a coaching approach and they're
mm,
delegating the roles to the kids and they're doing it really beautifully and really gently. But they're coming to work and being something different. So I think that's often missing is realizing you're allowed to be yourself and that that's a good thing. Um, and kind of paired with that, or maybe to one side of it, I think often is self-awareness.
mhm,
I think to your point, when you're talking about being a waitress or a server, thinking what are these people, what is their impact on me? I think that is the place that lots of people go to, is that their focus is inward. And I think being able to be aware enough inward that you can then look out is often what's missing.
mhm.
There's a
Yeah,
couple of things there.
yeah, that definitely resonates. I mean, I think with conflict management, it starts with self-awareness, right? It's always
Mm.
starting with me. We think when someone's going to help you, maybe with a conflict, you think, great, you're going to tell that other person what to do. And it's like, it doesn't really work that way. Let's go ahead and start with the self and de-escalate the self.
Yeah.
But I am interested in this idea of being authentic at work, and I'm very interested in professionalism. What does it mean to be professional? And
Mm.
and so there's this I think a mixed signal when people say be authentic, bring yourself to work, and also be professional. Because if I am on my outside of working hours, I am, let's say, a political activist, or I'm a deeply religious, or I'm this, that, or the other.
Hmm.
Oh, are those really appropriate topics for the work environment? But if that's like what I'm really into, so what do you think people mean? Because they just certainly don't mean bring your politics or your religion
Mm.
into work, or what is the message there?
I think there's a difference between being yourself and living your values to sharing all that there is about yourself. So I'm sure you will have come across, and we do often in our work, people that have worked together for 20 years or something, they've sat next to each other for 10 years on the same desk or something like that. And they think they know each other really well because they know everything about each other. They know all the facts. They know how many kids you've got. They know where you went on holiday last year. They know all the stuff. But it isn't until you invite them into a deeper level of conversation where the stuff becomes irrelevant and they start speaking about what's important to them in terms of their values. You know, actually, the reason I always get annoyed when you're late to meetings isn't because I'm a stickler for timing. It's because I have a deep sense of respect for people. And when you're late to a meeting with me, it just tells me that you don't respect me. That to me is a deeper understanding of someone and their values and what's important to them than you know, having to know anything about where their kids went to college. And I think that's what's often mistaken in organizations is we think because we know about someone that we know someone,
Mm.
and we don't.
Yeah.
So when I talk about being authentic, what I'm talking about there is that actually, if I have a real deep sense of fairness, I shouldn't have to park that at the door when I come into work, and turn on some, you know, professional mask that says, well, you know, fairness is all very good if you've got time. You know,
Right.
that doesn't make sense. That doesn't align with who I am.
Right.
So I do think this request of people to be authentic is beautiful and ill-explained at times. And I think actually if we could say to people, you know what I want you to do is work out what's really important to you and continue to value that when you're at work. Great. That's awesome. You know, not come to work and tell everybody about what you did on the weekend.
Mhm. I think that's really lovely. It's really well explained because it's very evocative, even of the you're late. To me, that means you're being disrespectful, right? And so
Mm.
it's an articulation or this sense of justice. I have a very strong sense of justice, and this is what it means to me here. And
Yeah.
so it's this ability, that self-awareness to
Mm.
be able to then say, oh, this is what's really bothering me, right? This is the actual issue, not the surface issue of the lateness or whatever it might be.
Mm.
This is what's going on. And it's when we understand that, then we can get past the kinds of conflicts that we see, which are very binary. It's this or that,
Absolutely.
right? Where this is our position, we can get to the needs. Because if I understand, oh, you have this really strong sense of justice, guess what? So do I.
Yeah.
So we are
We're
really,
demonstrating it differently,
that's right.
but
That's
we are
right.
aligned on our belief that there should be justice in the world.
That's right. And if I understand your lack of timeliness, according to me, is not rooted in disrespect, but it's rooted in maybe you've got stuff going on at home, or maybe you come from a different kind of culture about time.
Mm.
And so if I'm not going to be able to change my habits about time, I can at least articulate it to you that to me it has nothing to do. How can I demonstrate respect in another way?
Yeah.
Because I might be able to change my behavior given your request. I may not, but I
Mm.
can do something else to satisfy this genuine, authentic desire to have
Yeah.
fairness. We all want fairness or
Absolutely.
justice.
So,
Yeah.
so to take that analogy, you know, we go into a meeting and I'm late for you every week, Mary, right? And it drives you mad. And one day you say to me, it just makes me feel disrespected. It gives me an opportunity to say to you, okay, every time I walk to this meeting room, I walk through, you know, the finance team, and they all want to talk to me. And one of my values is that I really want to be accessible and approachable as a leader in this business. So when they say to me, can I have you for a minute? I always say yes. And that's why I'm always late to these meetings. But now that we've had this conversation, I can have a deeper understanding and more confidence saying to them, hey, can I come back to you after this meeting? Because it's important that I'm on time for Mary, because I
Mhm.
now understand why it's important to her that
Mhm.
I'm on time. So
Yeah.
we have both been in that scenario, absolutely true to our values, but because we haven't shared or expressed our values or what's important to us, we've created conflict, which could be massively impacting how we work together, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes, it's such a great example because my narrative of why you're late to this meeting is because you're disrespecting me.
Yeah.
And my narrative as to why I'm late to this meeting is because I care about being accessible, just like I'm accessible to you at this meeting, I'm accessible to these. And so we come with completely different
Absolutely.
expectations
Absolutely.
and then
And
yeah.
I don't want to, I'm mindful not to get political, but you know, you brought it up a little bit at the beginning there. There are so many instances when you really sit people down who believe themselves to be on opposite sides of a political spectrum, and you take away the stuff and you talk about their values, so often their values are defined. They just have a different view of how those values need to play out in the world.
Yeah.
And we can move forward in so many more interesting and creative ways if we start from a position of what's important to us rather than what's going on.
Hmm.
They're really
Absolutely.
different starting places.
They really are, because so many times we've decided somebody is irrational, and
Yeah,
so we cannot work with them and they need to be minimized or edged out or whatever it might be at work. But if we can stop and pause and reflect, that's all back to the self, right? So,
yeah,
which is wonderfully empowering, because it's not the other person needs to change, full stop. It's okay, what if I, why have I not said anything the first time this person was late?
yeah.
You know, why have I not articulated this value? Why have not, I not just asked, hey, what's going on? Why are you late?
Mm.
You know, without any sort of emotion. But 6 months in,
Oh my
right,
goodness.
I have
Now it's
all
a
of this.
thing.
That's right. And I have this narrative, right? I have a
Yeah,
narrative that
yeah.
this person doesn't have a good work ethic, or this person is selfish. And we
Mhm.
build these up instead of pausing, being reflective. And the more we do it, the sooner we'll catch ourselves to have those conversations so they don't spin out of control, which
Absolutely.
certainly in my culture, when it comes to politics, we have obviously really big disagreements,
Mm.
but most people want the same things, which
Yeah,
for their families, their community, and for the culture, they have different economic theories, different theories of human nature, different,
yeah,
religious backgrounds.
yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
so I'm interested in this idea of bringing joy into the work environment. I love the word joy. I don't
Mhm.
see it much in literature, but it's this, to me, it evokes this idea of brightness, of we talk a lot about belonging.
Mm.
And I think when you actually feel belonging in a place, there is a kind of joy. Joy is clearly different than happiness, because joy has to do with of well-being, right? So can you tell us
Mm.
a little bit about what it means to have joy in a work environment?
Yeah, I think I like that you brought in happiness because I think they are different. I think you can um have joy, be joyful at such a deep level that you can be unhappy at the same time. You know, I can be generally joyful about a scenario and then something happened and I go, oh, well, that's annoying. It hasn't ruined my joy.
Mhm.
Um, it it's much deeper than that. Um, and so I think when we talk about having joy in the workplace, um, it's a lot like culture, really. It is an emergent property. You know, Pizza Friday isn't going to make me joyful. It might make me happy and it might make me full. And it might be one of the ingredients to having a joyful workplace, but it in isolation isn't going to do that. So we take quite a systemic approach to our work in culture, which means that we look at both the things that you can see, you know, the behaviors, the systems, the lunches, the whatever it might be. But we also give a great deal of attention to the stuff that you can't see. So the beliefs and the mindsets that we're bringing in. And just as we have with our scenario of being late to a meeting, we go, okay, so the behaviors that we might see in that meeting is two people not collaborating.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's fix that by putting them together more often and saying, hey, you guys have got to work on the same project. Okay, great. But that's not going to make me joyful until we've really gone into the mindsets that we've just described and started to unpick them. And now we can laugh at the fact that I'm late because you know I'm not disrespecting you. And I tried my hardest on the way here to say no to people. And so there is a deeper connection that we're holding.
Mhm.
And I might sound like I'm sort of backing away from your question on joy, but I think
Mhm.
I think a key component to joy is a deeper level of connection to people.
Mhm.
And as I said earlier, that doesn't mean knowing where they went on holiday.
Mhm.
It means seeing them and feeling seen by them.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of sort of circular and systemic and joined up thinking in this for me. Um, and my worry is that I could say all that and it sounds really complicated, right? So anyone listening to this podcast then says, well, goodness, let's not do that. Let's do Pizza Friday. Um, and I don't think it has to be that complicated. I think we just have to give in to the idea of having better quality conversations to build better connections, um, and then see what happens, and maybe
Mm.
joy will emerge.
I love it as joy as an emergent quality. If you seek out joy, it's unlikely to be found, right?
Yeah,
You can, while you can find moments of happiness, but and we talk a lot about with leadership and reflection about emotional regulation, emotional intelligence,
yeah,
and I see joy as being being a part of that, right? So that
mm,
you can be really frustrated with what's going on in the market, or that a client didn't sign with you, or whatever it might be, or even a colleague is frustrating you, but it doesn't destroy you. It doesn't turn you
mm,
against them. It doesn't, right? If joy really is this, I think joy is a virtue, or a value. It's not. I don't think it's a value.
no, it's a quality,
It's a
maybe.
quality. It's like a
Yeah,
character trait in the sense, but it's developed, and it's through a habit, and it's through a kind of control. I think
mm,
control um of not being so shaken by
yeah,
uh I guess in my mind, I'm thinking of it as this emergent quality that can bubble up when you're stoic, which you don't typically think about joy with stoicism, but stoicism, right, is this idea that I can work on the things I can control, and I let go of the things that I can't.
yeah,
And I think that's how we get out of micromanaging, and that's how we get out of being selfish, and that's how we really develop as a leader, because leaders are always going to be those people who work for others and see the group and the whole, not to the detriment of themselves, but in
yeah.
this really
I think so. I think when you have joy, if you can have joy, um, it gives you a sense of resilience, a greater
mm,
resilience. I can take much more when I have a deep sense of joy or happiness or comfort in myself.
mhm,
I can handle much more, but if I don't have that right now, well, I'm gonna break like glass when
mm,
something comes at me. So and back to your point around regulation, I think when you have a greater sense of self, when you have a greater sense of joy in yourself and happiness with yourself, um you, you are going to be able to regulate more clearly because you don't have the fog in the way of understanding how you're really feeling.
mm.
So because I have a greater sense of clarity about the world, actually then when the red mists descend because my partner didn't wash up or, whatever's happened at home, I can recognize, well, this actually isn't really about the washing up. This
Mm,
is about I'm deflecting something that happened at work today that drove me crazy. So I'm gonna park that and I'm not gonna, throw the washing up at him right now or something. But I think it gives you a greater sense of perspective of what's really going on.
mhm,
So this is fun, isn't it? Because while it is an emergent property, at the same time, it is also a key ingredient to being able to perpetuate. It's a bit like a flywheel.
yeah.
I think if you can start getting towards some joy, then the more of it that comes, that flywheel is going to spin faster and faster, and perpetuate itself.
And so when I think about work environments, and
Yeah.
we think about developing ourselves and who we are when we show up at work, I think thinking about something like joy is really helpful, because it helps us get out of this idea that we are um, all these different sorts of people when we're at home, and then when we're in the community, and then when we're at work, but we are actually one whole self.
Hmm.
And as I develop myself in my private life, that pushes into my public life, and vice versa, right? So this
Yeah.
idea of a unified self. And so if I'm a centered person, I'm going to be go wherever I am, I'm going to be more centered, and I'm going to be more present, and I'm going to be able to sort of, quote unquote, roll with the punches.
Mm,
But if we are in an environment, so in an organizational structure, and we think about that joy breeds resilience, it breeds more belonging, which breeds engagement,
mm,
and creativity and buy-in, and all these things we really want for a good culture, then maybe we will think about um, not saying things like, "We don't have time for that here." And
Mm.
if what we don't have time for is dealing and treating people as people first and workers second, then it will be to the detriment of the organization itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's back to your early point around soft skills versus hard skills. You know, if I could wave a magic wand, I would redefine soft skills as really hard skills. Um, because they are harder that, teach me a skill, teach me. I'm not saying that that's always easy,
Right.
but help me to look inside myself, understand what's going on for me, look outside, understand the impact I'm about to have on the world, and they me. My goodness, that's so much harder. And so while I think it's incredibly valuable, it's not easy.
Yeah.
And I think the mistake that many organizations make, not purposefully, I
Yeah.
think it's a societal thing, is that we promote people into positions of people management, and we can argue over whether you can manage people another time perhaps, but people are promoted into positions of management or leadership and given no support on what that truly means,
Yeah.
because it's assumed that we can all do that. We can all, it's really easy, right? Oh yeah, just manage them. Well, hold on. When this is a little bit of an aside, Mary, I hope you don't mind, but when I had my first son, we were leaving the hospital, and I went up to the sort of the nurse's station, the counter, and I said, "Well, we're gonna go now." And I assumed I would have to sign something. And they were like, "Well, no, he's your baby." And I said, "Yeah, but this is quite a big deal. I'm about to take a human being home with me." Like I have to sign for an Amazon package. It seemed so crazy to me that you were going to let me loose on this child, with no training, no guidance. And of course, we do that in the workplace all the time with adults, people that actually go about, managing their own lives out there. And then we bring them into this building and we say, "Oh, now you work under and they manage you and they are going to try and control you." And da, da, da. There's this real weird tension with the way that we think we need to treat grown people in organizations who go around managing their own lives quite happily outside of our building. So it's a weird tension that I think we don't talk about enough. It
You
just happens.
you are speaking my language. I feel the same way. I mean, so we talk about adult to adult conversation. It's
Yeah,
like, so I taught for a very long time philosophy, and you could tell those, first year students, because they're like raising their hand to go to the bathroom. I'm like,
yeah,
if you need to leave the lecture, I mean, you're an adult, go to the
yeah.
bathroom. But so much of our, work structure is I'm managing Susie and Mark and Joe, and they have 45 minutes for lunch, and they are, this person's 47 minutes. I mean, it's so bizarre. It's like
Yeah,
now they aren't.
they're not capable of making responsible decisions.
Right. And so
Yeah.
much, people rise to their expectations, so if your
Mm,
expectation is low, then people will meet it. If your expectation is higher, they're much likely to meet it. And
yeah.
when you cooperate with people and you give them reasons and you bring them into the conversation, people say, "Oh, but that takes so much time," which is the opposite is true.
Mm,
When you have resistance and people are just paying lip service and they're quiet quitting because
mm.
nobody has told them what's going on and nobody has asked them,
Yeah,
"What do you think? What do you see?"
absolutely.
It's,
Absolutely.
yeah.
There's uh oh, I've just completely lost my train of thought, which is me being very human again, unfortunately. Oh, that's what it was. There's a great I think there's a challenge sometimes then when you and I have these conversations, which is our first one. I'm saying it like we do this all the time. And so we go off into our respective organizations and we go, "Okay, great, let's treat everyone like adults then." And we change everything. But to your point around people meet the expectation that's held for them, we've created way more freedom than anyone has ever experienced, and they don't know what to do with it. And so an example of that is an organization that I know where um, they moved from having a set number of annual leave, holiday days, vacation days, to saying unlimited. As long as your job gets done, you can take as much holiday as you like. Now, I get the intention there, and it's beautiful, right? The intention is you're an adult, you know what needs to be done, take all the time that you need as long as your job gets done. The reality is you're doing that to a system and to people within a system who don't know how to tell you they've got capacity, because that might mean they're dispensable.
Mhm.
So what happened in that organization is no one took any holiday, because if I've got time to take holiday and you're telling me as long as my job gets done, well then, surely I'm supposed to just look busy all the time.
Right.
And so they had this period where no one was taking any holiday because everyone was too scared of saying they'd got time to.
Yeah.
So they had to move to a system, a midway point that said, okay, we want to get to an adult to adult position. We want you to feel like you can take time off, but we recognize we're not there yet. So we are going to say you can have unlimited holiday, and here is the minimum number of days you have to take.
Mm.
There is a little bit, you talked about adult to adult, this kind of transactional analysis, little bit of parent-child, maybe it's drifting into parent-adolescent. I'm going to give you more boundaries. Sorry, I'm going to give you more freedom, but I am still going to put something in place so that you feel safe here. And so I do think it's a evolution of shifting these systems to being more adult to adult than an overhaul.
But I think even with adults, right? So I have to pay taxes. I
Yeah.
can't just do whatever I want just because I'm grown, right? And so I think our organizations need to have the right kind of structure. Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. In fact, the idea of unlimited holiday is wonderful, but it's inhumane, I think, because it doesn't understand people.
Yeah.
Because we want to know what is expected of us. And we
Yeah.
want to know, do I get a month? Do I get 2 weeks? Do I like what is the expectation? And then I will arrange my work around that. And I will
Yeah.
arrange my life around these expectations. And so we absolutely do need to be clear about what is excellent, what is good, what is the basic requirement,
Mm.
what are the rules, because we have different ideas sometimes of what civility is, okay?
Yes.
Because in your family, you like to yell it out and it means nothing. In fact, it means you're engaged. And in my family, it might be if anybody raises their voice, we crumble because we're being
Yeah.
torn apart. Okay, so what are we doing here in this culture in 2024? What does it look like to have civil conversations? What is expected here? And aligning all those is, I think, a way to collaborate with colleagues, but we set the boundaries so that when somebody doesn't take enough leave, we say, no, no, no. And if somebody, so that we can see abuses, because there will
Yeah.
be bad
Yeah, of course.
actors, that happens, but we
Yeah.
recognize it, and we recognize incivility behavior as to what civility means here, and then we can address it before all of a sudden that person is known as a yeller, or that person is known as a whatever
Yeah.
they may become known and labeled as.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think we often with our clients, we talk about freedom within a framework.
Yes.
I think defining what is the boundaries within which I can be free.
Mhm.
And in some organizations, that they can be really broad. This is the purpose of the organization, go get it.
Mhm.
But the framework that you have around you is literally you're going in that direction.
Yeah.
And other organizations, it's going to be much tighter, and even other roles, it might be tighter.
Yeah.
And different stages of career. We could go right back into situational leadership if we wanted, start echoing these old models, but start recognizing actually someone is new to the workplace. So I'm going to give them a tighter framework, not because I want to control them, but because I want them to learn to ride the bike on stabilizers first.
Yeah.
I can't remember what you call them in the States, but you know what I mean, the little
Yeah.
wheels on the side.
Training wheels is what we call
Training
them.
wheels, training wheels. Yes, yeah, that's it. Let's introduce some training wheels so that when we take them off, you're going to fly. And I think that's the important thing that is missing in many organizations is recognizing how tight or loose or gentle or whatever that framework needs to be so that people can really perform beautifully
Yeah.
within it.
And I think along with that, and maybe just another way to articulate this, is the particularity of individuals.
Mm.
So much we just want to make blanket statements like, this is
Oh,
what it means to be a professional, or this is whatever it might be, but it really is particular. So I might be new to an organization but I've done this role for this many years. I still need to learn how to do it here and what is the
Mm.
culture here, but my getting up to speed might be different. This might be the first time I'm in a corporate job, but I'm such a keen learner and an observer that the time that I need for these constraints is shorter. And so it's the management business, the leadership business is about particularity. It's about noticing the individual
Mm.
because you don't help groups succeed. It's only the group is going to succeed if the individuals are cared for and
Yeah.
seen. And being seen is always particular, which means it takes time. Oh,
Yeah.
well, we need to recognize that it does take time, which actually saves time, I think, in the long run.
Oh, completely. We have a phrase that we often use of let's slow down in order to speed up. Like
Mm,
this isn't about just slowing down and now we're always going to move at a snail's pace. It's just spending a greater amount of time in discovery,
mhm.
or in forming or whatever, whatever we want to call it, so that when we start doing stuff together, my goodness, we're away. Like we're not tripping each other up because we've been so clear on what it is we were all in this for.
Yeah.
Instead, what we see happening, and I'm sure you do in your work, is groups of people that come together and someone says, "Okay, cool, so we're going to build a car today," and everybody nods.
Right.
Great, and then we all walk out the door nodding in agreement. But one person thinks they're developing a coupe, and the next person thinks they're doing a truck, and the next person thinks it's a family car. And we've all got different expectations and understandings of the thing that we all just simultaneously signed up to. So spending a greater period of time in discovery and say, so what do we mean by car? Is going to mean that when we go off, we're not building 8 doors for a two-seater, right?
Right. That's a great analogy. Sammy, when you think about your work experiences, can you tell us about a time that you had a conflict at work and what happened, how you went about it?
Yeah. I was thinking about this and yeah, there's some interesting ones. One that's quite simple, I think, that happened fairly recently actually with a colleague of mine. Um, uh, was that, and I'm sure she won't mind me saying this because we laugh about it now, but in her eagerness in our conversations, and it is always eagerness and it is with beautiful intent, if I paused mid-sentence to sort of think about how I wanted to frame something, she would finish my sentence. And it was starting to really drive me crazy, right? Unfortunately, I didn't jump on it the first instance. And it got to the point where I noticed that whenever I was talking and she did it, the voices in my head were going, "Oh, why is she trying to guess?" And what? Just let me finish, and all this stuff. And then we were driving somewhere, and I said, "Hey, there's this thing that you've been doing, and I think I know why you're doing it, and I think it's coming from a really great place, but it's driving me mad, and this is how it's making me feel." Um, and um, and I led with feelings. I led with how it was making me feel. Um, and she absolutely heard that. And now we have this thing where occasionally she does it and she goes, "Oh, I just finished your sentence, didn't I?" Like, yeah, you did, yeah. And it's become a bit of a joke between us. But I noticed it build. It sounds really minor, right? And it sounds like one of those things you could ignore for a long time because it feels petty to bring it up. But it was getting bigger.
Mhm.
Um, and um, and I really noticed how much it was impacting the conversations we had and my desire to be in conversation with her.
Mhm.
And I love her to pieces. So
Mhm.
I don't want to be not working with her or not in conversation, but I really noticed it was making me hold back. Um, and although that probably sounds like quite a minimal conflict, I think we handled it well, despite it being a little uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Um, because we just spoke into it. We just said, this is what's going on for us. Um,
I
I
think
think
it's a
I, sorry.
no, go ahead, please.
Well, I think I lead with feelings often, which I think um, it encourages the person that I'm speaking to have empathy with me rather than feel attacked.
Mhm.
And I think it gives me room not to necessarily be able to articulate everything,
Mm.
I think the other mistake we have when we have conflict is we think we have to have all the facts and we have to have them right and we have to be able to swear by them. And I think to just lead with what's going on for you gives you room to then together explore those feelings and what might be leading to them rather than feeling like, you need to come with an answer. So
Mhm.
just recently I was in a board meeting and with a client and they were going down a road and everyone was quite agreeing with this route that they were taking. And I really noticed myself becoming uncomfortable. And I went through in my head the kind of trying to fix it myself. What are the facts here? What haven't they seen? What's wrong in this approach? And then I thought, no, just having an opposing opinion isn't necessarily going to help right now. So instead, I just said, guys, can we just pause for a minute? I'm noticing I'm feeling quite uncomfortable with this approach.
Mm.
Can we talk about why I might be feeling that way and see if it's resonating with anyone else, see if we've missed anything? So it's a very dialed down version of
Mm.
conflict.
Yeah.
It's very open, and I'm inviting people into what's going on for me.
Mhm.
And I'm asking them to help me a little bit as well. Actually,
Mhm.
I'm feeling really uncomfortable about the approach that we're taking here. Can you help me understand it? Or can we, think about why I'm uncomfortable? Which I think creates a really safe space to have a conversation about the difference that we're experiencing.
Mm. Oh gosh, I love that so much. And it goes back to what we said, if you don't know yourself, right? And
Yeah.
if you were in a hostile environment, like you already felt like the people around you weren't for you, then you wouldn't speak up, which is a
Mm,
loss to your organization and then to your clients,
yeah.
right? But that you felt comfortable enough and that your approach is so, most of us want to help. We want to
Yeah.
problem solve. We want to be drawn in.
Mm,
And it wasn't false or it wasn't weren't trying to play reverse psychology. You were being
no.
authentic and just saying, can we pause? Not like I'm taking this over and we're going to do this and we need to stop
Mm.
meeting because
And you guys are all wrong because,
right, but I'm
yeah.
seeing something. And it could be that through the conversation you get a point that you weren't getting before, like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
continue. Or it could be, oh, you're seeing something and now, and maybe other people were feeling it, or it's something to explore further. But it really, if we think about collaboration, that's a really beautiful example of modeling for others
Mm,
what you want them to do, and also modeling real collaboration.
mm.
Yeah.
And it does at times take I don't know if this is a very British phrase, but it takes a lot of bottle, right? It takes bravery or whatever. There was a scenario I was in a few years ago where I was working with a client's team, so a global fintech company, and there was a moment where I knew that the senior people in the room were trying to hold back, which was fine. It was a good thing. They were trying not to be the loudest voices in the room, amongst a group of leaders. So it was really positive in that way. But then there was some conflict between a member of the exec and a leader, and it was building. And as the facilitator, you're constantly playing that game of how 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 long do I let this run for?
Mhm.
How useful is this conflict to both the thing that they're talking about and to demonstrate, what good conversation looks like? Or is this taking us off piece and do I need to close it down? So I'm doing all this in my head. And then I just started to notice, actually, if I worked here, this wouldn't make me want to speak up.
Mm.
And we're in a conversation where we want people to be speaking up. So instead of holding my position as facilitator and client, I just said, actually, I'm feeling right now that if I worked here, given the response you've just made, I wouldn't be inclined to tell you what I think about anything else.
Mm.
And I just put that out there and said, and how does that make you feel as a leader? To have someone tell you, I would be holding back now based on your behaviors.
Mm.
Um, and it did take a lot of bottle, and I did worry that we were
Yes.
about to get sacked. Um, there was a moment afterwards, my colleague was like, "Well, that was a risky game you were playing." Um, but it's back to authenticity, and but I noticed myself not wanting to be authentic in that moment. I noticed
Yeah.
myself wanting to find a fix
Hmm.
and to solve it and to carry on with the day that we had designed.
Yeah.
And instead I thought, no, you know what? I think this might be a moment that's useful for people to learn from. And I am really feeling uncomfortable, and I
Hmm.
am feeling a bit intimidated. Um, and I don't work for these guys, so I'm probably the only person in the room who can say that.
Right.
So I probably should.
Yeah.
Um, and um, and one of the ways that I have allowed myself to do that is by not being too heavily reliant on any one client.
Yeah.
I work quite hard, and we all do. Farleigh work very hard not to be reliant on any one client, so that we don't ever do what they want us to do if we don't think it's the right thing.
Hmm.
We're never going to be yes men, because if we do what we think is right and you sack us, well, then that's what happened, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's really important as well.
Yeah. Independence in this business of consulting, especially when it comes to people matters, right?
Mm,
Because we really are talking about the quality of people's lives because it's the quality of their work environment.
absolutely. And we spend so much time there.
Yeah. And so I mean, to have the expectation somebody's going to come in and help with this climate, but then they see it and they don't speak up. The
Mm,
consultants don't say what needs to be said. I mean, that's another way to be let down and
yeah,
to,
you're just colluding with it.
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's a word that I've been using
Mm.
a lot over the last couple of years. When you hear a word used in a different way and you go, "Oh, that's mine now." Like
Right.
I think that's my watch out, is when am I colluding with an unhelpful system or an unhelpful behavior,
Mm.
um, as opposed to allowing it, because allowing says that I have power,
Mm.
and I could stop it. And I can't stop it, but I
Right.
can stop colluding with it. I can stop encouraging it or condoning it. And as you say,
Mhm.
as an independent consultant, I do see a big part of my role, being to name what I think is going on,
Mhm.
or to ask a question. Actually, maybe it's not name. Maybe that's too diagnostic. Maybe it's not name. Maybe it's just say, "Hey, anyone else feeling this right now?" And ask a question.
I love that. I also love your first example, the personal example, because it's a great example of how the so-called little thing, we don't speak up because it's little. We don't want to be labeled as petty. We want to be team players.
Mm.
We might even like this person, and if we speak up, they're gonna feelings, all the stuff that goes on in our head as to why
Yeah,
we don't
yeah,
speak up. But then it compounds, and then we get to the place where, as you're saying, I don't even want to maybe talk to this person because I don't want to have to deal with this. And then let's suppose that your colleague then did something else, like left you off an email chain, or
yeah. That's going to be
now,
so much bigger, right?
yes. And so I guess my question to you is, this is a colleague that you like,
Yes,
that
yeah,
you work well with,
yeah,
but it took you a little while to speak up. Once you noticed it, you still didn't probably do it right away.
yeah.
What was that? What was going on that you didn't do
Um, ooh,
sooner?
this is good. This is therapy, I like this. Um, I think I think one of the things that would have held me back is I know she's well intentioned.
Mhm.
So I certainly wasn't carrying a belief that she was trying to irritate me
Right.
or that she knew better or anything like this. This is an incredibly intelligent yet humble woman.
Mhm.
So a part of me probably was just going, you know and love this person, just get over it.
Mhm.
Get over it, right? This is
Mhm.
your shit. This isn't, she's lovely. She's not doing this to upset you.
Mhm.
So that's probably what held me back, in the first instance, was my beliefs about her. And then ironically, it's probably those beliefs that allowed me to speak to her eventually,
Mhm.
because I know that she wouldn't want me to be being irritated,
Mhm.
and I know that she wouldn't want me to be feeling the way that I was, because she cares about me too.
Mhm.
So what held me back was probably also what allowed me to speak to her eventually.
Mhm.
Um, and as you described, I don't want to ruin a friendship.
Mhm.
I think I often talk about how, I think we give feedback freely to people who, we don't know.
Mhm.
So someone calls you up to change your cell phone plan. and you hang up on them, right? That is very clear, very abrupt feedback. Hopefully you don't do that, but we can be fairly direct. I don't want a new plan. Bye. Then we go through this middle ground of people who are closer to us, friends, acquaintances, neighbors, who we resist giving feedback to because now there is something at risk. Our friendship or our relationship is at risk.
Mhm.
And then you go to the people who are really, really close to you, who you give feedback to freely because our relationship isn't at risk from this
Mhm.
feedback because there
Mhm.
is an unconditional sense to our relationship.
Yeah.
So I can tell my partner, don't go out in those jeans, they look awful. And I know he's going to receive that in she doesn't want me to look awful.
Right.
So but this middle ground bit
Yeah.
where we struggle to give feedback because the relationship isn't unconditional, but it is important to us,
Yeah.
is the area I think that stops most of us giving feedback that would benefit the relationship or would benefit the individuals.
Yeah.
And so we have to almost push them closer to us and go, I'm going to trust that this maybe it's not unconditional, but it's less conditional. I'm going to trust them to trust my intention here.
Mm.
And I think that's what I did with her. And she is so fabulous. But I decided to trust that she would trust my intention.
Mhm.
And that was what allowed me to take that risk.
Mm. I also think it's just so, I mean, it's so true that a lot of times we don't say something, especially in that circle of relationships where we do have a good relationship with a colleague, because we wonder, can I just give, is it a me problem?
Yeah.
And sometimes, if we're reflective enough, we might realize it is a me problem.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
And so then good. I'm glad I didn't say anything because the more I thought about it, the more the problem isn't that person. Maybe it is an organizational problem, maybe it's a manager problem, maybe it
Hmm.
is a me problem, and my pain in a way was misplaced.
Yes.
But and I think that's good, right? We don't want to just go blasting other people or,
Yeah.
saying you're doing this or I'm feeling this way because of this behavior from you. Uh, but once we realize it really is something that is getting in the way, then the question is that it's that risk analysis we're always doing. And it's
Mm.
harder when we've already had problems with somebody else at work.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't feel like they are necessarily for me, or there's a variety of things that have happened that either lay unaddressed or when addressed didn't um, help the relationship.
Yeah.
Then this question, what am I going to do now? How do I
Mm.
continue to show up and speak up? Is it worth it? All that kind of
Mm.
questions we have as to the why we don't act for our good and the good of others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think this is where, and back to the name of the podcast, conflict is a really interesting word, um, because it's not something I experience very often. And I think one of the reasons for that is that when anything is conflictful, is that a word? Should we invent that?
Sure.
Um, uh, I think I move it to dialogue very quickly.
Mhm.
And so I will often with clients, clients will say to me, I don't like conflict, so I'm not going to have that conversation. Well, you're the one that's decided it needed to be conflictful. um, you're the one that decided it was going to be conflict as opposed to a quality conversation. So I think sometimes that's a really easy reframing that can allow us to get into those conversations is this isn't going to be conflict. This is going to be a conversation.
Yeah.
And it might be a tough conversation, but it's going to be a conversation. And conversation and dialogue both have in them a sense of exchange rather than monologue.
Yeah.
Conflict can often feel like two people near each other in monologue. We're
Yeah.
not really listening. But dialogue and conversation says, you're listening to me and I'm listening to you. And while you're talking, I'm not reloading, I'm not getting ready with what to say back to you. I'm going to respond to what you're really saying. Um, and so I think that can be really helpful. And the other thing to your point, particularly if you've had challenges with someone before, um, is to remind yourself and even really state it quite overtly. I'm a big fan of just saying stuff. Your intention. I think
Yeah.
that's really important. Starting a conversation with, um, this has been feeling uncomfortable for me lately, and I really don't want it to. I want it to feel, okay to work together. And even if I'm a bit utopian occasionally, and I realize there are realities where people just don't like each other. And sometimes I think that's useful to say as well. Just be like, look, I know we've never really got on and we're probably never going to be best friends, but I think we could probably work together in a way that is better than it is right now.
Hmm. Yeah.
How could we both be served better by this relationship?
Yeah.
That is so much more open, so much more conversational and open-ended than the thing that you do every week drives me crazy. I want you to stop doing that.
Yeah.
Like that's just it's not going to get you anywhere.
Right. The first one that you said was so empowering. And the second one of the thing you do is
Mm,
disempowering because you have to change and you're
yeah,
not going to change. And so I'm stuck. But the other is this recognition. But what do we want to do? What do you want? What do I want?
yeah. How can
You
we just make
know?
this how can we make this relationship, this gap between you and I, this thing,
Yeah,
work better for both of us?
that's right. And listeners, so we talked about hard skills and really, really hard skills. That's going to be my new name for soft skills because if you're listening and thinking about having these conversations, a lot of times, what happens in our body and we think about, we escalate, could I really do this? You can. It takes some work and preparation, but it is hard. And the thing is, we can do hard things.
Mm,
But I think I love because I'm very interested in dialogue and de-escalating yourself so that you're ready to actually have a conversation with
mm,
another human person, which is a back and forth. It's not just about me venting. And but that is I'm also recognizing it's hard. If it's hard for you, it's hard for you.
mm.
Recognize it and do it anyway, right?
Yeah,
If we're waiting for us to not feel anything about it, I mean, well
it's not going to
then
happen.
yeah, and you don't need to have the conversation anyway. I mean, that means it
Yes.
just doesn't matter to you. So you've moved on. So,
Yeah, I like that. I think one of the to pepper in something that I really love in those moments of preparation, right? And it might be preparation like I'm going to spend 3 days sitting down and getting ready for this, or it might be my hand is about to touch the door handle and
mhm,
I'm going into something that I feel may have conflict. And lots of people talk about it now, but I think breathing
mhm,
is just so important. And I love that breathing is one of the very few things in our body that both happens automatically and we can take control of.
mhm,
And so whenever you are feeling like this desire to take control, which is often when we're in situations where it may feel like there's conflict, I'm going to take control of this. Actually, just take control of your breathing instead. You are taking control of something.
mhm,
You are consciously shifting the way that your body is interacting with the world by the way that you're breathing in and out. And it may just give you, even if it's 2 breaths, just pause long enough to regulate or
mhm,
to become, hint at a little curiosity of what might be going on for someone else.
mhm.
So I think a breath or two in those moments is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, breath, the pause. Absolutely. Well, Sammy, I could talk to you forever. So let me end with a question I usually ask. As you look into the future of work, what do you think needs to happen so that not only will everyone be treated with dignity and respect, but that workers will be encouraged to thrive and flourish?
I think I think we need to bust a few myths. I think we need to bust the myth that you can manage people. I'm sorry, inconvenient, but you can't. You can lead people and you can encourage people and you can create environments for people to be at their best in, but you can't manage them.
Mm,
Um, and I think the other is that an organization exists. It just doesn't. A
mm,
colleague of mine, Graham, uses this lovely phrase that an organization is just people organizing, right? So the more that we can stop thinking about the logo and the
mm,
history and actually just think these are the human beings that are currently making things happen,
mm,
the more focus we may give to treating them as human beings and interacting with them as human beings and as adults, and as these complex, beautiful, messy things that make the world go round, um, and get a little bit closer to them.
mm. Well, I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time. I just really have enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
Take care. Sammy, thank you so much for being on Conflict Managed. I really enjoyed our conversation. Conflict Managed is produced by Third Party Workplace Conflict Restoration Services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back. We have new episodes every Tuesday. If you haven't had a chance to check out my new book, How to Be Unprofessional at Work, Tips to Ensure Failure. It's 80 tips of what not to do, and looks at what we ought to do instead to have a healthy work environment. Our music is courtesy of Dove Pilot. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Take care.